you gotta love handling food. And what I see too often with chefs, you go to hire a sous chef or chef, and they're dying to get in that office right there, and get home at 5:00, and you're like, dude, get out of my restaurant.
Right.
That if you don't love to cook and to handle food, that you can't be here. And so for me, if somebody is 22 years old and they want to be a chef, it's like, don't even think about that right now. Just think about how fun it is to handle food. Take a carrot, peel it, cut it just the way you want, add it to this other thing. It doesn't have to be, all the sexiest ingredients. It's just that I love handling food. And I think that's the thing. So
this episode made possible by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, chef and co-owner of Midway Mercantile, Chef John Platt. My man, John, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I feel unstoppable pretty much every day.
Awesome. I cannot wait to get into your story. I'm here because good friend Susan Abbott called you out when I had her on the show. She's doing some really cool things with Know My Menu. I'm interested to dive into your experience with Know My Menu as well at some point of today's conversation.
Sure, love it.
But we're really here to dive into who you are, how you got to where you are today, and I can't wait to dive in. But let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
It's about the people.
It's about the people. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean so many things, and I hope over the course of this conversation you'll get it. But, I love food, but I'm always, when I make the food, I'm thinking about somebody else eating it, not me.
Go deeper.
Yeah. So I think that you can get all fascinated about ingredients, but I think one of the characteristics of the restaurants that I've owned is that the food that I make is quite appealing. And that may sound I'm going to try to dig into that a little bit further. But, I'm always conscious of not being weird. I want it to be interesting, but not weird. So somebody goes, oh, I've never had that, but it sounds interesting, rather than, that sounds weird.
Yeah.
Okay. And I have visited many restaurants in my life where I'm like, this is just kind of weird. And so I guess where I'm going is that it's, for me, when I'm making up a new recipe, a new dish for the restaurant, when we're going to put it on the menu, I'm really thinking about, is this something that people want and like, as opposed to, and I like to stretch them a little bit, but I am not doing it for me.
Right. It's not for your ego. It's for, you want the food to be approachable.
I really do. And I hope that it rings a few bells for them in some of their. So I feel like there's a kind of it's not a historic quality, but I like playing into people's food traditions, and then trying to take it to a slightly new place.
Cool.
So it's the people but then of course, all the people that I work with.
Right.
And that, is kind of can become trite, but, I've really had to realize that every day I come to work, no matter what's on my mind and what I think I'm going to get done today, I got to be ready when one of my staff looks at me and something is wrong.
Right.
And I can't just say, dude, buck up. We're here. We're working. I got to find out. And I got to figure out where he is and how, or she is, how we're going to get that person to where we want to be today and help them. So.
Right. It's about everybody else but you. And if you take care of everybody else, then it seems to work out for you.
It's really good.
Yeah. And I'm curious, do you think there was a period in food and beverage hospitality where we kind of got away from that mindset of it's about the guests, it's about everybody, it's about, it's not about you? Do you think we kind of got lost in that for a while where people were cooking for themselves?
I'm going to be in big trouble here. I'm going to diss the bear a little bit.
Okay.
I think that, and I haven't started the third season.
I'm afraid to, because they get into fine dining.
Yeah.
I'm like, isn't this what you were trying to avoid in seasons 1 and 2?
Yeah. So, but I think somewhere he and she represent for me that sometime uber focus on the food and forgetting the people. And I guess it just never that never really rocked me. So
I got you.
So in answer to your question, yes, I do think that that happens. And, I've realized that one of the reasons that restaurants fail so often is not just that the restaurant business is so hard, but the person at the helm doesn't quite have the right focus.
Yeah, it's interesting. I push back a lot on award culture. If you listen to the show, you probably heard me mention this before. I'm not like, I don't think the people behind James Beard and Michelin Star are evil people.
Right.
I just don't think that what they're doing for the industry helps the industry, because they reward people for the food, and it's so much. They're creating those awards for the consumer. And the consumer only cares about the food, and everybody just starts to focus on the food. And you have to start to do things that are just out of this world crazy to be able to get the attention of these award companies. So then we just become all consumed with trying to juxtapose ourselves from the rest of the industry by focusing on just like outlandish food and crazy things.
Yes, agreed.
And we forget about the people.
I agree.
So I don't know why I chose to go down that rabbit hole. I've gone down it so many times before.
But you got a kin right here.
Okay.
And I think that, I probably when I opened this restaurant and it started to become popular, I thought, oh, wow, maybe there's awards ahead. And then, and I kind of danced with that for a couple of years. And then I realized that, well, we're in the middle of nowhere, and so sometimes that's how you become known. Right. Oh, you're in the middle of nowhere. But I was like, no, you know what? This is a big restaurant with a lot of people that come into it, and I'm making them happy. And that's what makes me feel good. And I need them to go, is everything okay? Oh, it's fabulous.
Yeah,
that's what I want.
I love that.
I don't need freaking plaque.
Before we go back in time and start sharing your story, where are you today? Paint the big picture without getting into a ton of detail on what is your portfolio? What does it look like?
I'm not sure I understand.
So you own Midway Mercantile.
Oh yeah.
Any other projects in the fold that we should know about?
No. So I have a pretty good answer to that. I'm 66 years old. Our restaurant in Seattle had the restaurant. It had a big catering business that was really like a second business. And when I came here, I said, I turned 60 when I got here. I said, I'm not leaving the restaurant anymore. We're going to do it here. We get to do a lot of weddings, events, stuff here, nice things like that. But I'm really here, and I'm not trying to open another place. I'm not trying to make a bigger empire. What I've done is taken this existing space and the patio out there and maximize.
How many seats?
180.
180 seats.
Yes.
Go ahead.
And I had 60 in Seattle.
And you're in Midway, Utah. It's weird. It's it is in the middle of nowhere, but it's a something in the middle of nowhere because there's other things going on here. You have Park City, depending on which way you decide to drive. It's only 20 miles away, but it takes about an hour to get there, depending on which way you go.
20 minutes.
And you got Salt Lake City not too far away, and this area is exploding. It's it's a momentum market. Yeah, it's driving around, riding my bike around this morning. There's just so much construction everywhere.
It's
so
incredible.
So you're in a really cool spot. So that's where you are today.
And we own this building.
And you own the building. That's huge.
That's huge.
So back in 2000, does it make sense to start there? Or do we go even further back?
Well, I often tell this story, but I think it's a good one. I go back to when I was about 13, maybe 14, can't remember which.
Okay.
6 kids in our family. I was the middle, third of 6. And my mother, great cook, cooked like crazy for us, beautiful person. She was exasperated one day, looked at me and said, okay, John, that's it. I'll make you 3 meals a day. The other 5 you're going to have to make yourself. And true story. And that's when I started cooking. So
big appetite, huh?
Yeah, big appetite and loved food. And so that's where I feel like it started.
Okay.
And but I went off to college, dropped out for a few years, worked as a teaching tennis pro. Then went back, got my degree. I said, I want to be an English teacher.
And this is like the mid 80s?
This would have been, right, 76. So I graduated from college in 82.
Okay.
And I went off and became a high school English teacher in a boarding school in Colorado.
Okay.
And one of the funny things is that, these kids are there, and I'm a dorm head. And so a couple times a semester, I would work this thing out where I would make dinner for them. Not the dining hall. I'd actually make dinner, and they had a way they could pay for that. And then I went on to become a high school principal, and we would have faculty meetings.
For the same school?
Different school.
Okay.
Moved up to Seattle and Tacoma. And then I would cook for the staff for the faculty meetings.
Okay. So for the students at this boarding school, were you like literally like cooking like board? Were you like...
No, just so instead of going to dinner at the dining hall once every 6 weeks, I would cook the dinner and serve it to them in my apartment, in the dormitory.
Got it. And you said that they would pay for that?
Yeah. So, they had they have an account, and, I'd basically just charge, I don't know, $12 or something to buy the ingredients and that sort of thing.
That's cool.
But it's just funny in retrospect to think about the times that I was cooking,
right?
Kind of practicing cooking for people.
And then you became the principal, and you started doing that for the staff, where we left off. And then when did you stop? When did you leave the school systems?
So in 1995, I had been a finalist, one of two, for a headmaster job in Philadelphia. And I didn't get the job. The next fall, headhunters are back, and I'm like, I'm looking for a headmaster job. And an old friend of mine had stopped through, and we got talking. And he said, well, what's going on? I said, well, I want to be a headmaster for 5 years, and then I want to open my own restaurant. And, simple. He looked at me and he said, well, what happens if 4 years and 10 months from now you get run over by a truck? And it was like, that quick. I was like, I already know what I want to do. And I just put 5 years between me and it.
Why were you thinking like that, do you think?
Because I wanted to make food for people. That's what I wanted to do. And it was a real joy for me. But I think I was afraid of, you need money. If I go be a headmaster, I can kind of set myself up.
What is the difference between a headmaster and a principal?
Okay, so in private school world, so I was a high school principal of a K through 12 school, and the headmaster was more of an administrator overseeing the whole thing. Okay. As a high school principal in a private school, I still taught a class. I was more directly involved with kids and parents. The headmaster is really pretty much the adults.
Got it. Kind of like, so they focus on the adults, like dealing with parents?
Yes, and donors. And think of it like in the public school system, more like the superintendent of schools.
Okay. Got it. So, but you said, I'm going to go do 5 years as a headmaster. You're thinking that the 5 years will help you raise the money you need to one day open your restaurant, your dream restaurant.
Yeah.
But you always wanted to be a restaurant owner.
No.
Okay.
No,
when did that come into your mind?
That had come into my mind probably in the 2 years prior to that revelation.
2 years. Were you a principal at this time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what year did you leave the school system?
So in fall of 95, I stood up in front of all the students, the high school English teacher and principal who loved Thoreau and all the romantics and Emerson, and stood up and quoted a bunch of stuff about, I got several other lives to lead and no more time for this one. And, I got to follow, I got to go out to the front of the bow of the ship and be, running into life that way. And so then I left at the end of that school year, which was 96.
96.
So
4 years from leaving one career before opening your first restaurant.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
What were you doing in that 4 year period?
Well, I didn't know a thing about. I'd never worked in a restaurant.
And this is 1996.
Exactly.
So there's not a lot of resources. I don't even think owner.com is around at this point.
Nothing.com was probably around.
Yeah, restaurantowner.com wasn't even around at that point. Before the .com boom.
So So, applying what few connections I had, and I was down in Tacoma, but I was living in Seattle, but I'd been a teacher in Tacoma. And so I had a few connections into some restaurants, a guy named Tom Douglas, who was a big restaurateur in
I've
Seattle.
had him on the show.
Oh, he's great, yeah. And so he kind of owed this gal a favor, and so he kind of like let me just come in, and I was more front of house, kind of staging. But it was almost without him even knowing. He just sort of turned me over to somebody. And so, I was just trying to like get my foot in the door. And I was a freaking principal and a coach and a dorm head, like what the heck. And so it was funny actually, because then I'm kind of catching on at this bar, and I've got a hernia, and I got to have hernia surgery, which is not really great for moving kegs around. I'll get to it here. So I had the surgery, bought a newspaper so I could look for a job, because that's how you looked for a job back then. And there was an ad for one of my favorite restaurants looking for a day waiter and a day bartender. And I took a shower, and I could hardly walk. But I kind of screwed up my courage and stepped in the door, and there was the GM at the door at 2:00 in the afternoon. And they were looking for waiters who could become managers. And here I was with lots of management experience. So he took a chance on me, hired me. So.
And you're in your late 30s, early 40s at this point?
Exactly.
Yeah. What was it like those first few years, like later in life, like almost like a midlife crisis point, right? For a lot of people. Did you get like a side eye?
I was so in. I think that everybody just was like, wow, that dude he'll do anything.
Okay.
And not like in a bad way do anything, but like,
committed.
He's, I'm working as a day waiter, and I'm like, wiping the tables and getting them reset, and, there may be a busser, but I'm helping doing that. And, I was just in, and I loved it.
How long were you at this restaurant?
So I really worked for them for the 3.5 years that led to when we opened our own restaurant. So they had a couple of different restaurants, and I worked at a few of them.
Okay, so it was first Tom Douglas's restaurants where you kind of were just staging.
Yes, exactly.
Just kind of being a fly on the wall, taking it in.
Yeah.
What a great place to start too. To like see at what that level of restaurateur operates at.
Yeah.
And then how long were you doing that before you started working as the day server?
2 months.
2 months. Okay. And then 3 years. What were those? I mean, how do you unpackage 3 years in a couple of minutes, right?
So crazy. I started as a day waiter, day bartender.
Got it.
I move into night waiting, night bartending. Then 6 months in, they're like, would you, the two owners, Jeremy and Peter, who really gave me my life there, they meet with me and said, we need an assistant manager over at our other restaurant. So I moved over there and kind of continued with waiting, bartending. Now I'm into the management side of things. In the meantime, I'm cooking a little cafe on Friday nights where I get to make the menu and do that whole thing. And I'm kind of experimenting with catering kind of for friends. In the end, about a year later, it was awkward. Peter and Jeremy came to me and said, we want you to go back to the original restaurant and be the operations manager.
So this is a year and a half in from being like first walking through the door.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I didn't think that the general manager who had hired me at that restaurant was doing a good job. And I turned them down. I said, I can't go work for him. So they blinked and they said, how about if we offer you the general manager job? I was like, well, I wasn't vying for that, I just didn't want to do that. And so then I became the general manager. And so it was awesome because I was totally learning the restaurant business. These guys had maybe 5 restaurants. The main office for it was in the building where that restaurant was, where I was the GM.
Okay.
So,
what up, unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's the profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing and recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master of restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
So you got to be close to the core of all the stuff that was happening.
Yep.
Well, I don't want to skip totally over Tom Douglas Restaurants because I feel like, you know, knowing who he is and knowing what he's done in Seattle, he's a big deal.
Yeah.
So was there an impression, you know, your first impression with the Tom Douglas Restaurants, was there an impression that stuck with you to, you know, throughout your journey coming up and learning?
I really do think so. And it's interesting that because a guy who became a great friend of mine and was a good friend of Tom's was Terry Retro.
Oh, yeah. He just recently passed
away.
Yeah.
So sad.
Yeah. He was awesome. Another past guest on the show, by the way. He was so much fun.
He was an incredible guy.
Yeah.
Incredible dude. But I think that really both of those guys, I felt like they loved food and the restaurant business, and they didn't put business first. You know, they put their people and they put the customers and the food first. And that was a great message. You know, they didn't have 1,000 spreadsheets that were all about how do I make another $7. You know, it was, well, I need to treat my people better than I am, and I want to keep them, so I got to do that.
And this is in the 90s.
Yeah.
Before all the real challenges that we started to face in the late 2010s, where it started getting really lean out there.
Yeah. Yeah. But, you know, realistically, you say that, just quick digression. I mean, you know, so I opened in 2000, and, you know, Cook's in 2000, you remember, were barely open, and then the .com crash happens.
Right.
And, but Cook's were, in those days, I'm so hungover, I can't go to work today. They just don't show up. And then the next day, they go across the street and get a job.
Yeah.
Because there's not enough cooks, and we all needed them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my experience really until about 2 years ago was with, particularly on the cook side, just hard to get people that would stay for the duration.
Yeah, there's truth to that. You said up to 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'll be unpackaging that later as to why you think that's changed. So really it was a culture that you pulled from Tom Douglas, like their values. Yeah. Was like the big things that really impacted you at this time. So what about over the next 3 years? When you're starting as a server, what was the first couple days like? The first couple of weeks, were you like, did I make the right choice, or were you totally into it?
So into it.
Yeah.
I just, I loved the restaurant to begin with. Mm-hmm. It was a restaurant, I should name it. It's called Coastal Kitchen. And it was in Seattle neighborhood, Capitol Hill. And I already loved the restaurant. And here I was serving the food. And the people were cool and fun. And people I worked with, I was like, oh my gosh, this is, it's different from the school world, where there's a lot of stodginess.
Yeah.
A lot of people want to, kind of do their independent thing, and the principal's kind of bugging them and all this sort of thing. And instead, it was like, we're just going to get the job done. It's going to be busy, and we're going to work together. I love all that shit.
Yeah. So you're totally fine, by the way. Don't worry about it. It's a restaurant business podcast. People walk through. You're cool.
But the other thing I want to mention about that experience was that their restaurants, what they did was so Coastal Kitchen went to a different coast every quarter. Okay. So they kept their core menu, but now we're in Indonesia. Now we're in Hawaii. Now we're in Portugal. And so what was amazing for me was, and the research that the chefs did into that was awesome.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
But it really brought home for me food in its culture, And so I've never been a very good fusion person. You know, that when I start thinking about an ingredient, I think about where it's from, and I think about what do they eat there.
Right.
You know.
Okay. So in terms of like business, were you learning, because you started as the server, you were the AGM, then became the GM, and then you became you're at the GM at the headquarters.
Yeah.
So what were the biggest lessons that you think you picked up during those 3 years in terms of how to run a business?
How to make a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
You know, make your own. And you know, that it actually, there are numbers in this thing, and it's not just all your gut.
Right. So you kind of gave like a little bit of like, I don't know, what's the word? Like you mentioned the numbers before, and how it wasn't important to like that restaurant group. They didn't prioritize it, right? And over people.
Well,
over culture.
That's more what I was saying about Tom Douglas and
right.
Terry.
But this group,
they were pretty hard about the numbers.
They were hard.
Yeah.
Tom Douglas?
Yeah. No, this was
the other
this was Peter and Jeremy.
Okay.
Yeah, they were pretty hard with the numbers.
But that's a good thing, wouldn't you say?
Oh, great.
To a degree? Okay.
Yeah, no, it was really good for me to see that, but also to see how to unpack it. Like, okay, you raised this 50 cents. Look how much that is at the end of the year.
Right.
You know, you
50 cents,
lose
hundreds
50 cents
or thousands of time adds up.
You lose 50 cents, take it to the end of the year.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, and so, and they had very good practices about, you know, doing it on the 4 week schedule, you know, inventories, not on the monthly schedule, which are all wonky with, oh, now it's on a Sunday, now it's on a Friday,
right.
You know, that kind of thing.
You might have 29 episodes. You might have 29 days in this month, but next month might be 31.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
So you're not looking at the kind of apples to apples. And so I learned a lot of that good basic nuts and bolts from them, I felt like.
Yeah.
And I learned how to make spreadsheets and how to create them, and, you know, not just making schedules, but, you know, doing costing and all that kind of thing. And so it was a phenomenal education for me.
26 years later, right? For, you know, at present day, this is 2 years before you open your first restaurant. Looking back at that time, even going to your first restaurant, were there things that you know now that, like, looking back then, you're just like, wow, I've learned a lot?
Oh yeah, so much.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's the kind of stuff I want to unpackage going.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that it's not very sexy, but volume is important. And I think that I always, you know, from coming from Peter and Jeremy's business, they were very clearly one of the logos at one of the restaurants was "Eat it and beat it," but they were consciously, you know, we're gonna not charge top dollar. We're going to serve people good food at a fair price, get them in, get them out, get the next ones in, and we're going to make our money on volume rather than on, you know, just a few diners but a really high ticket price.
Right. So throughput. So were they more casual restaurants?
They were, I kind of call them casual upscale sort of thing. Yeah. I mean,
so quality food in a low pressure.
Yeah.
Low, I don't know. Not like a corporate setting, essentially, where people are taking their time and really.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, what did you learn and how to do that well?
Well, I think that probably what was not good that I learned was being a little too price conscious, and it really wasn't until this restaurant that I realized, you know, you own the building, you build a nice building.
Yeah.
You got to pay for that. You know, I got to pay for that, and my customers got to help me pay for that.
So when you're saying being price conscious, it was more about the consumer, much like you start with the consumer in mind when you're making the food, you're thinking about the price and how is the consumer going to pay for this?
Right. How far can we push them? We got to, you know, let's go from 15 and a quarter to 15.75, not go up to 16 and a quarter, and you know, and
so they were really good at that.
They were good at it,
pushing the envelope.
No, I mean, I think they were very
conservative.
Yeah.
So they were seeing how can we add value with as little cost to the guest as possible.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, when what was it that went on? oh, we were going to bring in some Nyman Ranch stuff. I mean, that was a long time ago to
Yeah,
do that, right? And, we're going to have to raise our prices to do it. But of course, Nyman Ranch didn't have a lot of cachet at that point. So, we bumped things a little bit. And I think that, it constrained me for many years from pushing some of those prices higher and realizing they're not running for the door when you do that.
Right.
And we live though next to Park City, where
Right.
their prices are ridiculous. They're what they have to be for where they are and all that sort of thing. But, people come down the road and they're like, what? We're getting great food and it's so much less. And yet I'm feeling like, no, I got food costs down where I always wanted it to be and could never get it to.
Right. So you got the food costs down to always where you wanted to be. So I guess, what is I feel like we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but we're going to go down into this rabbit hole anyway. Like, what is your approach today? Like, how do you manage your menu in a way that, you're adding value, but you're not really concerned about when do you know how to splurge or when to splurge, and how do you rationalize that?
Well, I think I think that everybody who's in the restaurant business, and probably in most businesses, understands it's just tight margin. That if you get too fat, somebody undercuts you.
Right.
In any business. So, you're an airline and your ticket prices, you're like, we're going to raise our ticket prices and that's going to be how we're going to make all this money. And all the other airlines go, we're going to charge less.
Right.
And so,
especially when the search engines are optimized to bring up the lowest price first.
Yeah. And so, all businesses, it's tight, and, but I think I've just gotten really, over the years, got really good at figuring out how to use all that food and never, that's the funny thing. People are like, they'll come to you and go, I'm starting this nonprofit. And, so we're thinking maybe the food that you're going to throw away, you could donate to us and we could serve it. And I'm like,
I don't throw food away.
I don't throw food away, man. That's crazy. I use it.
Yeah.
And I don't use bad food. I just order the right amount. And those guys that I first started with, Peter and Jeremy, they were very tight, very smart about that.
Yeah.
And it's that. I think that I've, in a nicer setting like this, our restaurant in Seattle was in a old building from the 1920s, and we had done some nice homey touches to it, so it felt like a cozy place to go, but it didn't feel particularly upscale, and I think this whole thing that we set up here was meant to be an upscale mountain town restaurant, so you could come here and pay $55 for a steak, or you could come here and get a burger. And that it's and it turns out the clientele around here, a lot of people who've lived in big cities that want good food and are ready to pay for it.
Right.
Yeah.
So going back to 2000, you give yourself a year to open your first restaurant?
Well, no. So really what all went down was that I went to Peter and Jeremy and said, I'd really like to be an owner. I'm ready. Would you let me buy into this restaurant?
Okay.
And they, I think, gave it fair and reasonable consideration, talked to their CPA, and decided it's going to be too difficult to have a part owner of one of our restaurants and, this whole thing. And I basically took that as, you're letting me go. You're going to let me go when I decide to go. And this opportunity, I had a great friend who's now an owner here, and he was an owner there, Pablo, who was a teacher with me in Tacoma. And so his name is Pablo because he taught Spanish.
Okay.
But he was a realtor on the side. And really, he was a realtor who was a teacher on the side. And so one night, he probably had too much to drink, and he said, probably 98. If you ever really want to open a restaurant, I'd love to do it with you. Well, I remembered that. And the day, but being a realtor, so then it's like, okay, well, let's start looking at spaces,
Yeah.
And, classically, all the spaces that are available is all the restaurants that have closed badly. So they're in bad locations. And, but we stumbled on this one that was nearby to where I lived and had been a very popular restaurant, and it closed and it just sat there empty. And we made a play for it and didn't work out because somebody else had already made a play. And then another month later, I called the guy and said, "What's going on?" He said, "Oh, they fell through, but I felt bad going back to you." I'm like, "Dude,
Yeah,
let's
we
go."
want it.
Yeah. So, so I lost the strain there, but I really went. I gave a month's notice at the Coastal Kitchen, and that got me done at the beginning of June when we were starting our remodel of this restaurant.
This is 99.
It was 2000.
2000. Okay,
Yeah.
so June 2000.
Yep, and we opened in August of 2000.
Oh wow, three months.
Yeah, it seemed forever to me.
That's crazy by today. So
By today's standards, yeah.
what was the restaurant like? Was it gutted? Was there what were you starting with?
I would say it was a beloved Asian greasy spoon.
Okay.
Okay, they fired out fast food. It was more of a breakfast, lunch. I think they closed at 8 at night, maybe 7. But it was a neighborhood standby to go in and get tasty food that was well laced with grease.
Got
you know
it.
what I mean?
So, but when the restaurant closed, right? When you were looking at it, was the kitchen turnkey? Did they leave equipment behind? Were there tables and chairs? Like, did you empty everything out and put all?
We
new stuff
really
in?
had to clear it out.
Okay.
It was pretty gross.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So what we bought really was the name. Well, not the name. We bought. We were leasing the building. The owner of the restaurant owned the building.
got it.
So we leased it from him, and what we got was to get to have that location, and we got a few of his recipes that we wanted.
Okay. So you kept some of the recipes at this
Yeah.
location.
Yeah.
What was the name of the restaurant? Your first restaurant?
It was called St. Cloud's.
St. Cloud's.
Yep, and it was came from I was an English teacher, so at that time, my then wife was in a long-term production of The Cider House Rules, a John Irving novel. That the name of the orphanage in it was called St. Cloud's.
Okay.
So I spent so much of that time cooking for the actors in that large ensemble cast. There was probably 25 people. And so, I would cook. It's opening night. I'm going to cook afterward. It's, dress rehearsal. We're going to cook afterward and, whatever. So, so it was in our life that show. And, we're casting about for a name, and as Pablo will remember, I'm like, oh, how about Johnny Shack? It's like, oh my God, I'm going to kill myself. We can't have that. And so the show had gone down to LA and was being performed down there at the Mark Taper Forum. And one of the actors who had been in it all along, was a friend of mine, sent us a postcard. And in my memory, there were 30 suggested names for the restaurant. And in the center, it said St. Cloud's. And somehow I was like, St. Cloud's. Because, as we said there, St. Cloud's, where the orphans come to find a sense of home and family. And it doubled as, in Seattle, the clouds are our saints.
Okay. I like it.
So it had that kind of, it made no sense to many people, but it ended up having that nice, homey, welcoming.
I love it.
Family feel to
I
it.
can see why you'd get behind that. So you move into this new location. You open your first restaurant. You are leasing from the owner who had a restaurant there prior. He licensed basically the recipes to you. He let you use the recipes. You had your own recipes. You rebranded, so it wasn't the same brand, but you had some staple menu items from the previous restaurant. Was there a kitchen? Was there did you have a kitchen?
We had to. There was a place. There was a cooking line.
Yeah.
And there was a back kitchen.
Yeah.
And we just, replaced stuff, put in a new hood.
How much money did you have to spend to open? I guess is where I'm going. Was this a big expense, or is it kind of turnkey for the most part in terms of what you needed to get started?
No, it was, it was a full remodel.
Okay.
But in those days, you could do that on, I don't know, was it a couple $100,000 we
Right.
spent?
Sounds about right.
And it was, and we definitely cut some corners, and we, freaking worked ourselves and all that sort of thing. So it was kind of, this restaurant we threw much more money into and had a vision that we were going to try to establish something a little nicer. That was really heart and soul. And we went out and found some investors who would, buy a share at $5,000 or $10,000.
Well, yeah, that's where I was going. Like, and I think I might have forgotten. I usually give my guests a heads up that I like to talk about things you're not supposed to talk about, the money, the relationships, because that's what will get you in trouble in the restaurant industry. But it sounds like you weren't like over the top, like spending a bunch of money. You were saying pretty lean. Did you have debt from your previous life, or were you pretty much debt free from?
No, the kind of funny thing was that when I quit my job and, got to the end of the school year, I had a month of paid vacation or paid time off, whatever. And I was like, oh my gosh, we were renting a house. We had sold our house a couple of years ago and we were renting. We paid off all our cars. We had no debt.
Wow. That's huge.
It was like somehow freedom's been a big deal for me all my life. It's like there's some poems I wrote when I was like 12 that sometime we'll go into, but that freedom, right. I need freedom. And somehow I'd been setting myself up. So, oh my God, in 1996, when I left teaching, I had no debt. I could take a job as a day waiter and make $20,000 a year.
I was curious about that. Yeah.
And make it.
That's awesome. Which is huge. And I think a lot of times when people are looking to open a restaurant, they're looking at what do I need? What more do I need? What more do I need? And it's like, stop. What less do you need? So you can take on more.
Yeah.
Because you need to get as lean as possible if you're going to open a restaurant.
You got to work.
Maybe even sell some of your assets to get cash heavy.
Yeah. Yeah. And we were lucky then. It was 2000. Okay. .com was exploding.
Yeah.
We're in Microsoft world. So I knew a lot of people from Microsoft and other, company, Amazon. And these guys are like, oh, for $5,000, I can invest in a restaurant.
Yeah.
Oh, I could buy 2 shares for $10,000. That was the most we'd let them buy, it was like giving me a $1 bill for them.
And you raised what, 250,000, 300,000 approximately?
So we raised. I think we raised 60 to 80.
Okay.
And then Pablo put in a lot and I put in some.
Okay.
To get us to that number.
In terms of partners, were there any other partners? Because I know that currently, I'm afraid I'm going to say I know Sharon, but is it Sandra? No, Sandra.
Sandra, my wife.
Sorry. Sandra. So was she wasn't in the picture at this point, was she?
No, I was. That was sadly, that was as that restaurant was opening, that first marriage was ending.
You didn't tell her that you wanted to open a restaurant when you got married, did you?
No, it wasn't even that. We'd been married 16 years, and it was great, but it was in retrospect we were not the two that should have been together.
Even with all the dinners you were making for her friends or her castmates.
That's the thing. I mean, we were a great team, but. Yeah. Anyway,
I got you. So you have partners with investment. You have your own money that you're putting down, and you raise about $80,000.
Yep. And the thing is that we wrote an LLC that made Pablo and I the two owners. These people were investors with absolutely no rights.
Okay.
And at that time, we were able to get away with it. And we didn't even, at a later time, maybe it was 10 years later or something, I actually invested in a friend's restaurant. And the deal was that investment was worth dollars in his restaurant that I could redeem at like $100 increments.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But these people didn't get anything.
So was there like a like an investment, like a partner agreement or some kind of agreement that you had them sign? Or,
Yes.
Okay. Were
Yeah.
there lawyers involved?
Yeah.
Good.
But we had a lawyer who'd been recommended to us, an older guy, really nice, wrote up the LLC. When we wanted to get some investors, he was able to write that up, and it was all, I doubt anybody who was an investor took that to a lawyer. I think they're just like, oh,
Yeah.
we love John.
I can say I own a restaurant and have a place to go and
Yeah.
go have friends there. And,
yeah. So
So what about repayment? That's one thing I'm curious about. I like to did you have a repayment structure that was set from the beginning?
it's so. If any of you are listening, I feel bad. Okay, they made almost nothing out of it.
Okay.
And that we started out. Maybe a year and a half in, we sold, another 50,000 in shares, maybe.
Why did you need another 50,000?
Well, because we didn't have enough capital to get going, to keep going, and the .com thing, crashed so quickly after that we started out, we're kind of soaring.
Yeah.
And then, oh my God, Seattle's like, I just started a new company. It's just gone,
Yeah.
And so it kind of freaked things out. I think that I didn't get the gene that says money is the most important thing.
I mean, I don't think that it is the most important thing. How did we start today's conversation?
Yeah, but I know people who all they think about is how can it make more money? Not even more money for me, but just like that's my goal is make more money.
Yeah. So there's being fiscally responsible, right? Because being fiscally responsible allows you to provide fiscal security to the people that you're bringing in on this project, which is important. We need security, right? But at the same time, it's not about how much money can I put into my pocket.
Yeah.
Am I doing this because I want to do it, or am I doing it because it will make the most money?
And I wanted to do this so badly. And, in the end, the victory is I had that restaurant for 17 years and we were solid for 17 years. But only twice did I actually pay anything to those investors. So I never paid them back their initial investment. And when we sold, then we kind of made them whole from their original amount. But so they basically,
So you paid your debts.
Yeah.
Got it. But they never made a profit off of like a interest.
Right. And, for what it's worth, my brother, who is 2 years younger, but has actually been in the restaurant business his whole life, when he finally at 50 decided to open a restaurant at my urging in like 2010 or 11, pretty tricky time to get in, but kind of a good time to get a good deal on a place. He got these investors and made a lot of promises, and that got really ugly. And he was able, through an what do they call it? One of those loans, SBA loans.
Yeah.
He was able, after I think 2 years, to just buy those people out.
So he got the loan to pay off the investors
and get rid of them because they were killing him. And
in what way?
They were. He couldn't pay what he had promised he'd pay initially, and they weren't having it. You said you would pay us this much. He said, I can pay you this much, and I'll increase it, by the third year, because, you just don't have that money at the beginning.
Right. And this is one of the big things you learned, too. And this is the number one reason why restaurants fail is that they are undercapitalized in the first year. Because you need enough money to open, right? Let's call that, by today's standards, between $500,000 and $1 million. And then you need probably at least a year of operating capital on top of that.
Yeah.
So that is every expense that you could think of. You're making zero money. You need to have enough money to pay all of your bills, all of your people, all of your taxes. You need to that in the bank when you open, because it could take a year to build the momentum to build up regular clientele.
Right. And really 3 years to get, I think of it like a water skier. when you're trying to get up, trying to get up,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden you're on the ski.
Yeah.
It's 3 years before
And then
you're
you fall
actually
down
on the ski.
You get up a little bit faster than next time.
That was the fall down part. Yeah, that happens. But it's and for me, it's just freaking work. Just go in and do it do it every day and love it. But don't think, oh, I can just pay all these other people and I'll sit back.
Right.
Like, no, I'll do it and eventually pay those.
And what's
people.
cool today is I think that the idea, like the definition of a restaurant is changing. Where the sense of like a restaurant in like the late 90s was a brick and mortar, 4 walls, full service restaurant.
Yeah.
Where today a restaurant could be an idea. You take, you might be good at graphic design. You can create a brand, right? You get a website for like maybe $100 investment, right? For the first month, where you can like have online ordering, all this stuff. You go find a kitchen that you can cook in. Doesn't even need to be a storefront, a ghost kitchen, and you just turn it on and see if you can't make money. I don't think that works in all markets.
Yeah.
I don't think it worked the way that people wanted it to, but like you can do a combination of pop-ups, ghost kitchens, commissaries, food courts. Like you can scale into the brick and mortar. You don't need to go all in like you did 30 years ago.
Yeah. Very good point.
What up, Unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's the profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master on restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
Reflecting back from 2000 to 2017, during this period, like you identified one of the biggest learning like lessons during your evolution as a restaurateur, that you need cash in the bank. You need to be liquid in at least a year of operating capital. Yeah. So what were the other big lessons you learned along the way that the first 3 years working for somebody else didn't teach you?
Well, so I think when we opened, we were closed maybe Tuesday nights. And we did lunch and dinner. And I didn't really study, if you want to call it, the demographics of that neighborhood. It was a neighborhood in Seattle. And so
there was a lot of different demographics in Seattle in terms of like a mix of culture.
Well, I just think in this particular case, doing a lunch business, there are no businesses there.
Right.
So there was no lunch business.
Yeah, everybody was still working in offices at this point.
Yeah, and they were not out. And this was more of a residential neighborhood, so you could have a good dinner clientele. And people at that time in Seattle were happy to drive from one neighborhood to another to go to a restaurant, but not at lunch.
Right.
So it was incredible because I think it was 2 years. It might have been about 2 years when we decided we're going to cut lunch. And we're going to be open 7 days a week. Okay. And in 1 week, we made more on Tuesday night than we'd ever made at lunch all week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, oh. And one of the things I really learned that I just can't believe more people don't get this. Open 7 nights a week. Because whatever night you're closed, nobody can keep it straight. So then they don't go on Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday. Oh, no, they're closed. Because I know they're closed one of them, you know? And, if you can, and I get the idea of 5 days a week, you got people on 40 hours and that sort of thing. But I felt like as soon as I could think outside that box, we're open every night. Nobody's got to wonder, Well, should we go over to Voila? I can't remember if they're open tonight. Well, I know St. Cloud's is open.
Right.
Let's go there,
But you weren't there 7 days a week, were you?
I was at the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah. But, well, 6 days, because remember, we weren't open on Tuesday.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and so by that time then, but, I think my experience as a manager helped me, being a principal and a department head and all that sort of thing. It helped me think about how to scale things that don't mean I have to do every darn thing.
Right. Well, that was one thing I was curious about too, just being a teacher and a coach. I think when you are a restaurant owner, you're a teacher, you're a coach, you're a mechanic, you're a chef, you're everything you need to be or anything you need to be that day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you probably, I'm assuming, especially like you mentioned, the principal and headmaster skill sets too, management.
Yeah.
Right. So, again, along this evolution, what was your biggest pain? Like after, realizing you had to go to 7 days a week and after realizing we didn't have enough operating capital, like what were the biggest pain points that you remember, the struggles?
Staff, just painful. In the end at St. Cloud's, it's interesting because those first probably 2 years of turnover, I had many people who had been there 15 years, 10 to 15 years when we closed in 17. It's awesome. But man, at the beginning, I'm down at the jail, trying to help this guy get out of jail so he can come to work. And
well, this is why I love the restaurant industry though, because we literally we have such transformative power.
Yeah.
Like who else goes recruiting at the jail?
Right. Exactly.
We are opportunity for people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But keep going.
And, the alcoholics I had to deal with this one unbelievably fabulous woman who was not a young woman who came to me one day and said, I got to go deal with this, and she went and came back a year later, clean for the rest of her life, amazing person. But, you got a lot of people. And it hurts me. That stuff hurts me, and I the cook who finally found out that, he was drinking the cooking wine. I'm like, that's so dark.
Yeah.
It's the worst thing in the world. And that's how you were getting by. And so I guess it just was, I think one of the most painful things was that for 17 years, I had to check my accounts every morning. And not infrequently had to move money, and it's just what I had to do.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like awful, but I couldn't not do it.
Right.
Because we screw up.
So 2 challenges. One was staffing, keeping staff. The other was cash flow management.
Absolutely.
So when did you said eventually you ended up, when you closed, you had people that are with you for 15, 10 years. When did the things start to shift with turnover?
Yeah, it really was. I would say probably around year 3 is when it started to settle in.
Okay.
And people really stayed for a longer time. When I think back on those people, I would think that they were there in year 5 or 6 and have to realize that person was there in year 0.7. That there were so many people with so many problems. And, I think it's so interesting. Moving here and opening a restaurant probably was actually the same there. I move here, open a restaurant, and I need to hire staff. Well, kind of like the way America was founded, the only people available have been fired somewhere else.
Right. Well, and this is a totally different market than Seattle in terms of just per capita.
Yeah. So small. And so I've got all these people coming in, selling themselves, no references. And eventually you discover, oh, yeah, you were fired there and you were fired there and you were fired there. And I had, this guy doesn't even speak English, so he'd never know I said this. But, I had a cook whose name in Spanish was cero, which means 0. And that was exactly what he brought. And that's when you start, you
don't know what you don't know.
You don't know. And why is somebody going to come and work for you? There's lots of places where the paycheck has been coming. I'm going to go work for John.
Right.
Wonder if I'll get a paycheck next week, So
No, I hear
anyway,
that.
long.
But back to, and I want to get to Midway, but I feel like this
Yeah.
was like your education with the first
was,
restaurant.
yeah.
So not many people get a brand new fresh start. So I want to get into what you did differently after getting that first run, right? That 17-year run. So what were you doing differently in terms of to retain people, or was it just a matter of slowly? Oh, this is a good person. Like we'll take care of this person, and eventually we'll get another good. Oh, we'll get another good one. Let's hang on to them, and until it took 3 or 4 years to
It
get
did.
that deep.
You know, you had to find somebody with some character, you know, and when, I mean, I was paying health insurance. I was paying 100% of the health insurance until 2014 for anybody who worked 30 hours or more.
That's
100%.
awesome.
Yeah.
So did you do things differently to retain people, or do you think it was just a matter of like putting in the time to find the people, and once you found the good ones, you're able to hang on to them?
I think that what happened was that I'd like to say I think I cared about the people, and some of the people were beyond caring. They that wouldn't do enough for them.
Right.
But somebody else would come and be like, "Oh my God, I'm working in this other place." I mean, like, take this, okay? So I hire a chef, and I said to him, "Okay, I'm going to hire you for a 50-hour-a-week job, 5 days a week, okay? If you have to come in on your day off, I'll pay you." And he's like, "What?" I said, "Well, it's not fair. How
Right.
can I, I'm not paying this other guy who didn't come. So why am I just
Gonna pocket that money, and
taking
make you-
advantage of
right.
you, you know?" And so I think that whole kind of thing of feeling like, okay, I'm going to provide health insurance. I'm going to give you a schedule that's predictable. Like, to me, that's the craziest thing in the restaurant business, is that I have to wait till Sunday afternoon to find out when I'm working this week.
Yeah, that's crazy.
How do you have a life?
Right.
You know?
And
So I'd say,
you're surprised when people don't want to come work in the restaurant industry.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
we did this to ourselves.
Yeah.
But I cut you short. I
well,
apologize.
because I always said, I want you to feel like you can make a living here. You know, you can, and somebody maybe is an actor or a writer or something. So they don't want 40 hours a week, but they want 20. And they want to know, I can work 20 hours a week and it'll be on this schedule. So I can tell my other job that I'm free during this time. I'm going to pay your health insurance. I'm going to eventually have a 401k. I think that was my mindset was, is this a way you can make a living, and not just struggle?
Got it. Okay, so 17 years in Seattle. What changed for you to say, like, I want to move to Midway, Utah?
It's not super popular to say this, but the push back then to $15 an hour for a waiter was a crushing blow when you're like, are you serious? These people are making $35 an hour with their tips. And I need to worry about you. And I've got cooks who, the cooks are making $25,000 to $30,000 a year, working full time and overtime, and this waiter is making $45,000 a year, and I need to give them a raise. And it just made it harder. So a couple of various things happened. Okay, that was definitely threatening, and it was it had started. We were 17 years old, and in retrospect, probably in about 2014, I should have done a major remodel and revision of that restaurant. That was our best year, but it also was probably, when you've got a lot of people moving in, young people come to work for Amazon, and Groupon, I'm going to where the Groupon is.
Yeah.
Their loyalty is zero.
Right.
They're just young people who want to go eat. And what's the new hip spot? I'm going there.
Yeah.
6 months later, I'm on to the new spot. So we were just, we weren't a very good fit anymore, I don't think.
Yeah.
And so it kind of worked out. I didn't talk about the catering thing, which I will in a minute. But it kind of worked out for us that was the right time. Our business was still totally viable. I was making a good living. but I could see that it was just going to become harder and harder and more soul-sucking.
Less freedom.
Freedom, baby. You got it. Totally.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100% behind the freedom mindset. I live in a truck camper, like,
Nice,
I
yeah.
like freedom, so I can support that. So you wanted to bring up catering.
Yeah, because we, in 2003, and I would say that was in my time of, kind of thinking I was going to become an entrepreneur who might own multiple restaurants. Okay. And I'd gotten to know a gal, and we bought her catering company and her with it. I don't mean we bought her, but she was
Right.
going to come with it. And so we started a catering company as a way to have kind of a second business, a second income. 60 seats, it's just not very big. And slow seasons that come along. And by 2010, when my kid went to college, and I had to do that, we were doing a lot of catering.
So would you say most of your business came through catering or the restaurant?
No, the restaurant was the big one, but the
Okay.
catering was a better profit margin.
For sure.
It was something that I could put a lot of my time into, as the restaurant was now running itself pretty well. And I got into, 2010 to 14 while he's in college, and, there's tips on this and all this sort of thing. And I was really making money that I needed as well as that the restaurant needed. But when I came here, just note, when I moved here, I said, I'm never leaving the building. I'm done catering.
Yeah, so like catering is one of these things that a lot of restaurateurs will do to increase cash flow. They're like, how can we use what we got and make more money? Catering. Like, you can instantly increase your throughput, and you can be creative, and you can name your price.
Yep.
Like, sign me up for that.
Yeah.
What are the downsides of catering that people don't think of?
It's, you're right about the money's good. And downsides are that you really kind of have to be available anytime.
Yeah.
So if I'm typically off on Sunday, but a good client who's got a great event happening on Sunday, honey,
yeah,
I'm working this Sunday.
Yeah.
Or, a month from now when the event is or whatever. So there's that. It is, it's just brutal to carry the food.
Right.
And, we were what I would call a finish on-site catering company. So we didn't make it, put it in a hot box, take it, open it up and serve it.
Right.
We prepped it, took it there, cooked it there, served it, do all the dishes, all that, drive back, haul it all back upstairs. It's physically,
It's a lot of work.
It's physically demanding.
I get stressed out carrying all this stuff, which isn't anything compared to what you need to do to feed 200 people.
So much,
Yeah.
and 500 person events and
Yeah.
and the other thing is that it was great for me as a chef because I cooked so much different food in that time.
Yeah.
And this person who wanted to do, she was turning 50 and she was born in 56. So we were going to do food from the 50s. It's not anything anybody wants to eat now, but
Steak and potatoes?
no, like, a lot of prefab kind of plays on Jell-O, this kind of thing. But, it caused me to cook a lot.
Yeah.
To just cook so many
Creative.
different kinds of things. And, when I came here, it's like, wow, my repertoire was like monstrous. And, and I'd cooked it all, and not like I dreamed it up. I made it. I did it all. So that's a good side, but it's, it's hard because you're making up new menus.
Well,
When people come here to do dinner, what I do is we say, no, we don't like to do a chicken, fish, or beef. I want you to circulate this menu of 12 items to your guests and have everybody choose. So they feel like they're having a restaurant experience. I got the shrimp and grits. I got the trout, whatever. Yeah. But we know how to do it day in and day out.
Yeah.
And because, catering, I had to be there because I made it up.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
So one thing that just kind of entered my mind is before this, your restaurant, you had no chef experience.
Right.
Because you came in as a server, bartender, went to AGM to general manager, and then you became a chef.
Yes, because on the side, I was cooking in that little cafe.
That's
I was
right.
catering, and I had been, cooking all my life.
Yeah.
But yes, no.
But in a restaurant setting,
No,
it's different.
none.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it worth getting into that learning curve, or?
Yeah. Well, I think that luckily I didn't get too crazy.
Okay.
I had the people in mind, you
Right.
know, and I was like, what do they like? And I'd done a lot of cooking for this, the theater crew and that sort of thing. So I'd learned a lot about that. But to call myself the chef then and to call myself the chef now, almost not related.
Well, you think about how many people call themselves a chef,
Yeah.
and you're like, what qualifies you as a chef? And you're
Yeah.
like, I work in a restaurant.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, can you run a team? Can you do cost of goods? Can you order? Can you purchase?
Yeah.
Can you like all these other variables that you need to know how to do to like run a restaurant business as a chef?
And just the flat out experience that you have with food, and it's a kind of a thing that I long loved Food and Wine magazine, not so much anymore, but the Best New Chefs thing, it's like, oh great, yeah, pick somebody who's been in it for a year or less, been the chef for a year or less. Like, dude, what I know now,
Right.
the number of things I've made, screwed up, fixed, I know stuff, and that's great. I feel so happy at this time in my life. I feel like I'm good at what I do.
Right.
I know how to do it.
We got to talk about Midway. We got to
Yeah.
get there already.
Yeah.
2017, you said the writing was on the wall. You saw where you were going. Seattle wasn't Seattle anymore. It wasn't the Seattle you knew.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're going. So why Midway? What was it about this location?
This was, the perfect serendipity that you dream of all your life, right? So very good friends from Seattle had moved down here. They wanted to live in a ski town, okay? He had been in Microsoft early, made a lot of money, so they were young retirees, younger. And they spent a couple of winters down in Tahoe, bad winters. We went down, visited them, skied there, whatever. They come down and stay in Hideout, which is near Park City. And we came down, visited them. Great, fun. At the end of that season, they said, we're going to move to Park City. And their realtor, by great luck, actually lived down here. And he said, come down the road here. You're going to get a lot more for your dollar. Let me just show you this town. So they bought down here. And then we just kept visiting them and, oh, it's so cool. Loved it. And late one night, we're now down in August, and summertime is a whole nother experience.
It's
in
beautiful.
Utah. Oh
here.
my God.
Yeah.
You know.
We're recording this. It's July.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And skiing's great, but in the summer you're like, oh my God, this is so cool.
Yeah.
And beautiful days, cold at night. Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
So we had awesome visit, and late one night, they're like, you should open a restaurant here. And I'm like, I should open a restaurant here. And of course, every time we came down to visit them, they'd always be like, sorry, there's nowhere to eat. We got to go to Park City. You should open a restaurant here. Well, I should open a restaurant. Blah, blah, blah. Wake up the next morning, forget it all. Okay.
Right.
We go home to Seattle. End of September, they call and they say, hey, we found the building for your restaurant. I'm like,
What are you talking about?
what restaurant, man? So that was 2016. Okay. And we came down on the 1st of December.
Who's we at this point?
This is Pablo, my wife Sandra, we got married in 2003. And our son, let's see, 17. Okay, we've got, totally blanking here. Okay, I've got a son who's 26.
Yep.
And I've got a son who is 7.
Got it.
Okay. And so we come down, and obviously we must have been thinking about it because, we had an appointment at the elementary school for my son, which is 2 blocks from here. And we walked in this building, and it's got, these big windows across the front, great view of Timpanogos. And in 24 hours, we had signed the papers to buy the building. And the 3 of us, Pablo and Sandra and I, had said, we're going to sell everything in Seattle and we're going to move here.
How long did it take to get you out here?
So the great thing is that in Utah, you got 60 days where at any time you can just go, I changed my mind, and you lose nothing.
Really?
Yeah, it's so crazy. Yeah.
So you could change your mind on a deal like that?
Yeah. You can put money down and you can even have it back.
Wow.
Yeah. It's
That's
amazing.
interesting.
So we knew we had 2 months to really kind of suss this thing out. And, but, we went back and we're like, okay, we can sell our house for bank. We can sell this restaurant. It's still profitable. I am making a good living there. Somebody could take my place. And
So the restaurant that you had, the St. Cloud's, was sold as a business.
yes, exactly.
And is it still running as that business today?
No.
Okay.
No.
How long did it last before it rebranded or when?
Well, so he closed for 5 days on the 1st of June when he took ownership. And when he reopened, despite what he'd said to the staff, it was a different menu, and the death knell was instant. And he made it 15 months.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
So you sold everything.
So we sold everything. And, this building, though, I mean, how many freaking, what do you call it, sandwich boards have I lived with where you're trying to get people to go one block over and one block over.
Right.
We're on Main Street.
Yeah. It's
right
a beautiful
here.
building too.
And it's a beautiful old building. And
was it a Mercantile?
Yeah, yeah.
So Mercantile is basically like hardware?
It's a grocery store.
Grocery store?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, originally it would be everything from hardware to grain to
Curtains.
bolts of fabric
Yeah.
to food.
Yeah.
And so this was originally the Bonner Brothers Mercantile.
Okay.
And it's 145 years old.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's cool. I think we had this vision for like I said, an upscale mountain town restaurant that people could feel comfortable coming from hiking, biking. It's not going to be so dressy, but it also for the friends visiting our friends that want to come out to dinner and not go to Park City, they could come and have a great meal.
Yeah.
And we just we lucked out. We walked in at that moment where this town was ready. Enough people who lived elsewhere knew something about food, and they were like, "We're clambering." And we had no idea. We just wanted to do it. I was the stupid one, but yeah.
So with all that, the 17 years of restaurant ownership experience beneath your belt at this point, going into a new restaurant, was there anything that you said, I'm going to do it differently this time?
Good question. Yeah, it's a good question. I definitely. I think this is a very funny story. It's funny among my friends. I was not ready to flinch at some price and some quality and some level of food. Okay. And, we were going to, we had a pizza oven, but we were going to do salmon out of that, but we had a pizza oven. We were going to have a burger, but we were also going to have some higher end stuff. And so we opened on February 8th. So it's probably about January 10th that these new friends of ours, including our realtor and our friends who had brought us down here, invited us over for dinner at Kay's house. Okay, and we go to Kay's house, and I'm like, not very long in, I'm getting very uncomfortable. I'm like, is this an intervention? These guys are all afraid that our menu is aiming too high.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was that what it was?
It's exactly what it was.
Oh, wow.
That they had seen the menu and they were worried for their friend John.
How close is the menu today to what it was then?
Not far from it.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was really interesting because so this ongoing joke with one of them is about the meatloaf, because he's like, I feel like you should have meatloaf on your menu. And I'm like, I'm not doing fucking meatloaf. And so then, in this thing, and I'm, my back is to the wall. I'm like, I'm new to this place and these guys, and I'm like, I'm excited about this
Making
place.
you second guess everything.
Everything,
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, so when's the last time you went out to dinner? Oh, 6 months ago. I was like, in quick order, it's like, you know what? You guys are not our clientele.
Yeah.
See ya. I'm leaving the building.
Yeah, right.
And but it was so long story just to say that I think I was ready to step up the game,
Right.
and not be embarrassed by it. And I think that was long for me, embarrassed by charging too much or doing too fancy. And, this is not a super fancy restaurant, but there's some really nice food here.
Right. And I think at the same time, there are some consumer shifts happening right now where people are more conscious than ever about what they put into their bodies. Mm-hmm. We're realizing that we are what we eat. and we are starting to reprioritize where our quality of food falls in that hierarchy of priorities, right?
Yeah.
And it's moving up that chain.
Yeah.
So, I mean, people want good quality food, well sourced, and that comes at a cost.
Yeah. And the other thing that was so significantly different was that, we built that restaurant on a shoestring, St. Cloud's, and, the building we were in probably should have been torn down before we even moved into it.
Yeah.
So we were, there were leaks in the roof. There were, things that made it quaint and also not city sophisticated, And
We're talking about St. Cloud.
St. Cloud's,
okay.
yes. And we decided here, with the help of our designer, who was actually an artist working in this room, renting it from the antique owner who owned the store, and we met her, and with her help, I think we were able to really see a way to put some swank on this that would make somebody feel like, I don't need to go to Park City, I could come here, but not get it too precious.
Right. No,
So,
I think there's a good balance. I really enjoy the vibe here. It's definitely my kind of place that I would go and hang out.
Yeah.
Quality food, elevated but not pretentious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, what were the new challenges you faced with this restaurant? First, full build out, right?
Yeah. And the great thing about that was that we knew everything was going to work.
Did you go to investors or banks this time?
No, it was Pablo and I and Sandra.
Okay.
And Pablo was the much bigger investor.
Is he still doing real estate?
No. So he moved here also. He dragged a year later, kind of kept the real estate going. He kept it going while he was down here, pretending he was still up there. And eventually he said, I'm done. I'm out. But he had a good living, but we did it as a loan that he put into it.
Okay.
We eventually, a couple years in, actually like a month before COVID, we were able to secure a great loan that took all, the 0% credit card things that we had patched it all together with, consolidated all, and
lower interest rate.
And put it out over a long time so that,
Okay. So, along that vein of the biggest challenges with this restaurant that were maybe unique to this restaurant that you didn't have to worry with the last restaurant.
Yeah. I mean, we were in a much bigger financial hole. But
do you mind talking about money?
No, I don't.
What was the total amount you needed?
So I think it ended up at 1.5.
1.5.
Yeah.
And that you were able to source that through the assets you sold in Seattle, between you and Sandra and Pablo.
Yep, exactly. And that included buying this building.
Okay. So 1.5 with you own the asset, no longer and the all the refurbishment.
Yeah.
What was it a big build out? Because it's open space, right?
So it was incredible that they started in November for real after they'd done demo. They started in November and we opened in February.
Wow!
And again, I was outraged how long it took them.
That's crazy. Oh,
and sure, I should be laughing about that, but I'm not. But in this case, we knew every pipe was new. Oh, good God!
Well, I've heard construction is really affordable in Utah, but I've also heard that one of the reasons why it's affordable is because the labor can be really cheap because there's a lot of construction companies that kind of keep it in the family.
I have not heard anything about.
Maybe it was someplace else I heard.
Yeah, because the housing prices here have gone crazy.
Right.
But just quick digression. The miracle of all this was, so we cobbled together the money, bought the building, did the remodel, got this place open and made it nice. The designer was incredible. I mean, she got things at not crazy prices, and she didn't charge us crazy prices for it. So it was all like a great team effort. And then it just started growing.
So,
I mean, this valley, it's insane. I mean, their
timing was amazing.
Incredible.
I
mean,
rode
Deer
around
Valley is going to it's just going to triple.
So is Deer Valley, Midway, Clarksville, or what's?
No, Deer Valley is the ski area.
Oh, okay.
Over at the Jordanelle Reservoir.
Okay, got it.
So over by the Jordanelle, Deer Valley is going to triple its size, and they're main entrance is over in Park City. Clearly, they will move a main entrance or the main entrance over to 15 minutes from us.
Got it.
With that, massive hotels, condos, homes, all this sort of thing. There's a Tiger Woods golf course going in with this whole big development. And I mean, the entire hillside in Heber is scheduled to become homes. 25,000 homes.
Yeah.
And we own this building.
Yeah.
So
like that alone is gonna like be your retirement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, it was an incredibly lucky thing that we came when we did. It was the right moment for people. But, the staffing problems were just the same. Horrible, so staffing, super tricky trying to find local products. I was in Seattle where even if they weren't local products, Seattle had the products.
They had a port.
Yeah, exactly. And here I am like trying to get fish. And luckily our fish purveyor in Seattle, a company called Ocean Beauty, distributed through Salt Lake.
Okay.
So I was working with a fishmonger that I knew, which I liked. But, you're like, there's no businesses around here, no farms or whatever. And freaking miracle that this guy, Chris Piper, who grew up here and went out in the world, lived in Seattle actually part of his life, but had learned farming, came back a month after we opened and decided he was going to open a farm in his family's back 40.
Oh, wow.
And he is like an artisan farmer that it's 4 blocks away.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So the challenge with staffing, you seem to have a great staff now.
Yes.
So how did you overcome that here? Was it just because more people eventually came?
Well, honestly, I think that, in the end, we became a job people wanted. Originally, people wanted a job because they needed a job, but now experienced waiters are like, oh, I can make money there.
Yeah.
And I can live here instead of commuting up to Park City.
Right.
Cooks, I think we eventually, kind of got, honestly, I got a lot of young kids that I started and trained them in. But I started to get some cooks who, many of whom work 2 jobs, but they were ready to work 4 or 5 days a week here.
Yep.
And the other job. And they're not trying to go somewhere.
Right.
So I found more stable people. And I think that, again, I just try to make it about the people.
Right.
Keep track of it.
I think there are cities like Midway all over the country right now. I think you used to have to live in a Seattle, a New York, a Los Angeles, a Miami, a Boston to get work, to get jobs.
Yeah.
But now more and more people are working digitally. People want to take that New York income and move to a place where they can stretch their dollar and have a golden toilet, and really have a better quality of life. So I think, plus I think there's just like more opportunity in these momentum markets where people, like the Midwest is growing like crazy right now,
Yeah, but this is interesting because the Homestead, which is a resort that opened, I think, originally in 1886, okay, and a folksy place, one of the 2 main hotels in Midway, and always was kind of a place that, didn't cost a lot, and so people from Salt Lake would come down, spend the weekend, that sort of thing. And they got bought several years ago by these guys who have thrown, it feels like $1 billion at it, okay? And they are really making a world-class place, and it's so cool, and it will be a good fit for us. But they're going to open 3 restaurants there. And I'm like, I don't know who you're going to find. I mean,
does that scare you?
It doesn't, because I know those people are happy, and a couple of years ago, as we kind of came out of COVID, it's like,
oh, so you're saying you don't know who they're going to find in terms of how to come work?
Yes,
got it.
Because there aren't. I mean, there were all those people who, had been fired somewhere else and came to work for me, and then we moved them along, and then got these people that are actually quality restaurant workers, but. It's still a tiny town.
Yeah.
And so...
Do you have hopes to scale?
No. No.
Do you worry that if you don't have the opportunities to give people, then they might go someplace else? If you get too deep, say you have like a general manager, a couple of AGMs, and then managers below that, and you get a new hire who's a rock star, but there's no upward mobility for them.
Right. That's a good question. Well, two things on that. I am 66 years old.
Right.
And I don't want to go open a new restaurant.
I knew that was in the back of my mind when I was asking the question.
Yeah.
Why would you want to accelerate at this point?
Yeah, and it hasn't always gone well to do that. And I've certainly seen people fail when they do it. And, and my passion is so much here.
Mm-hmm.
And my passion is with the guests here, with the menu here, and with the staff here. Like I walk in and I want to know, hugs all around and what's going on and how are you today? And, it's not just like, ¿Cómo estás? Like, how are you?
Yeah.
It's like, how are you? I want to know, and I'm waiting to hear.
Yeah.
You good today? Okay, good. We're going to move on now. But there was a question there. I'm not trying to scale.
Well, the question was, if you don't scale, are you worried about people leaving because they hit a ceiling here?
Well, from a front of house point of view, these people are just making more and more money.
Gotcha.
I mean, I have people that made $100,000 last year
Wow.
in Midway as a
crazy.
waiter.
That's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And and they worked 35, maybe they worked 40 hours a week.
I do want to talk about cash flow because that was something that it was a struggle earlier on for you
Yeah.
in your first restaurant. Was that ever an issue here?
Oh yeah, constantly. Yeah. So here's the game. What's also awesome here is that we have 2 awesome seasons, winter and summer. So during those times, money flies. Fall and spring. And to talk numbers. Okay. So if we're during our busy season going to make 10 to 15,000 a night, sometimes more. During our slow season, that can go to 5. So
You got to treat it like 10.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's and the other thing is I'm not cool with what they do in Park City, which is they close for 6 weeks, and all of their employees just have to go on unemployment, which is half at best. So I feel like we got to stay open. I got to, you guys, your rent is due every month.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
Well, plus there's more and more people coming here calling this year-round home.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So fall and spring are getting, probably better and better, but it's a huge hit. But I'm like, I can't say to these people, oh, your income's going to drop by 25% this
Right.
month.
Yeah, what I have seen other people do to circumnavigate or as a solution to this problem, seasonal restaurant places, right? In New Hampshire, there's somebody who owned a property, or New England, I should say, somebody who owned property on the beach, and they would be open during the summer.
Oh, wow.
And then it would close that restaurant during the winter, and then they had a location that they would open in the ski resorts.
Oh, nice, yeah.
So they were working full time.
Yeah.
They had their beach bum employees, that they would love, that they're seasonal workers, right?
Yeah.
That'd come back every season. And then a big chunk of those seasonal workers were also ski bumps.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they would take their team
Perfect.
up to, and it was only like a 2 or 3 hour drive.
Yeah.
So you're in the mountains in the winter and you're on the beach in the summer.
Yeah.
And you're only putting energy into peak periods.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really
Well,
cool.
and what I have to do is that for all of our talk at the beginning about business, I'm not driven by the dollar, and I'm not a very good businessman. I make payroll and all that sort of thing, but what I need to do is save more during the fat times, ride through the slower times.
Right.
But we have done some improvements to this building, and we're doing one right now that costs a bunch of money.
Right.
And and I'm like, oh, I need to set some of that aside to make it less stressful during those slow times.
I would love to introduce you to somebody. Her name's Casey Anton, and she's the author of Profit First for Restaurants. Have you heard of Profit First?
No.
So Mike McAllowitz is he coined the term Profit First. It's just a cash flow management tool.
Yeah.
It's not even like it's not even a software. you use your banks. It's just a way to so basically you've heard of the envelope system, like your grandmother probably used, right?
Yeah, my parents.
So, yeah, instead of having envelopes, you have checking accounts. So you have your income account. As you get paid, it goes into the income account, and then you use checking accounts as envelopes to move cash around.
Yeah.
So like if you want to make 10% profit, you got paid today. You take 10% of whatever's in that income and you put it into the profit.
Nice.
You just take that profit.
Yeah.
You take taxes out right from the top, and you take then you take taxes, and then operational expenses are the last thing that you take out, and what's left over is what you can afford to do.
Mm-hmm.
So you're making sure you're paying yourself first. You're taking profit, and you're paying the taxes, and then what's left over. So the point is, like, if you have a profit account where you're having 10% of all of your cash flow go into this profit account, you can then take that account after like 2 years and then put it towards assets.
Yeah.
So it's a cool tool. But she wrote,
That makes a lot of sense. And I have to admit that part of what is going on for me is my end of career thinking. You know, the Olympics are going to be here in 34.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
They haven't announced it.
Cat's out of the bag now.
Well, it seems like it seems guaranteed. You know, we were going to be the 30, but LA I think is 28.
When you say here, you're saying Park City?
Salt Lake.
Okay.
But there's some important venues here.
Summer or winter?
It's the winter.
Okay.
Yeah. But you know, this property is going to become valuable.
Yeah.
And so
sell it just before the Olympics? Is that what you're thinking?
You know, I don't know exactly, but the moves we've made in this, you know, like that pergola out there, that thing is going to be there for 100 years. The thing I'm doing in the kitchen is going to make my life in the kitchen way better.
What are you doing in the kitchen?
So our walk-in is midget.
Okay.
And our prep space is crappy for when we do these wine dinners. And so we're going to lose 2 seats, and we're going to be able to double our walk-in size and almost double our prep space.
That's huge.
And it's huge. And that's really just doing it for me. So I'm spending the money,
right?
But it's going to make my life so much nicer than the constant moving. Right. Why'd you put this on this shelf? Because there's nowhere else to put it, you know? And so, but yes, I need to be better at that side of it. Because when the money's flowing, it's easy to be careless.
Right.
And as my business partner, Pablo, said, who is himself pushing 80, I might like to get some money out of this.
Right.
And I'm busy paying our staff to keep them. And I'm like, oh, right, you want to get some money, because I'm like, okay, I'm making a good living at it.
Yeah.
But I'm also kind of thinking about how is that going to work out for me? You know, let's say I sold it and they paid me out over 10 years. He said, I'm going to be dead while you're getting money. So
yeah.
Anyway.
So, I mean, with about 10 minutes we have left, I want to make sure we talk about where your restaurant is today. We're kind of there now, current time. Yeah. One thing I am curious about, you've been in the industry now for 24 years. Technology has changed so much in the past 24 years. Was that a challenge for you, staying relevant with like restaurant tech?
If I, to the degree I understand that question and the tech of restaurants, I'll answer it. It's stupid. We never had a Vitamix at our restaurant in Seattle. We never had a sous vide. It's like, we don't do a lot with the sous vide, but Jesus, come on, John, you know? And the Vitamix just like is so much different than a food processor, but on the POS side, and that kind of side of it, I don't feel like we're at all cutting edge. And, our reservation system works through our point of sale, which is called AUPHAN.
Okay.
AUPHAN.
That's your point of sale?
Yep.
Say it one more time.
AUPHAN.
Okay.
AUPHAN. And I like it a lot, but the reservation system is not awesome.
Well, is that tied to Wasatch Food Rush delivery? That whole thing I saw.
Oh, that's just Wasatch. So Wasatch is the mountain range here.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
And no, it's okay. Food Rush is a local guy who has a food delivery service.
Okay.
And that.
I love that you're using local delivery services. And I don't even know if the third parties are here.
The third party was such a freaking disaster. It was so bad because So they'd order food at 8:00 at night, no drivers.
Right.
So the food would sit here until 9:30, and no one ever picked it up. And we're like, okay, so this is not good for anybody,
Right.
you know. But they just didn't have drivers, you
Right.
know. So so Wasatch Food Rush.
You mean millionaires and billionaires don't want to have their kids?
It's crazy,
driving?
isn't it?
Yeah.
It's amazing. But anyway, the Resi system, okay, it's not
Often
awesome.
dining.
Yeah, but the thing is that if I were to pay Open Table, part of what you're paying Open Table for is advertising. I don't need where else are you going to go here?
Right.
You know that. So I don't really need.
You just need a system.
I just need a system.
Yeah.
And and part of it is that now I have 2 hosts, and I used to have 1, and with 2, they can kind of stay on the ball and they can actually pick up the phone. But sometimes I just got to go, dude. It's a small town.
So I got to bring up, Know My Menu, because it was Susan Abbott who referred me to you, and you use Know My Menu. So somebody who's not really tapped into the world of technology, why are you so forward thinking on your menu?
Well, I think coming from Seattle, I was used to a very particular clientele, and so I learned a lot about it, and and it was kind of standard operation procedure. And I came here, and particularly gluten-free was just, I knew lots of people. I know lots of people are celiac, and it's like, I don't want to mess around with it. I don't want to mess around with them.
Right.
So
give them a tool.
Yeah, and so the thing is, I'm like, okay, pizza, I don't do gluten-free because there's flour everywhere.
Right.
It's going to go in an oven with flour in it. So
Right.
I'm just going to make you sick. So I'm not going to do that.
Right.
Pasta, I don't have a separate place that I'm going to have water for my gluten-free pasta. And so I can't do that. But you know what? My fryer never sees gluten, and pretty much everything else on the menu is either gluten-free or easily gluten-free.
Right.
And to me, that's the forward thinking that I do. We have a vegan menu, with a bunch of options on it. Vegan menu, right?
Yeah.
And I figured out a few years ago, I was looking at it, I was like, oh my God, I've got so many sauces that are vegan. Why don't I just
highlight it,
take out the meat and put in the veggies, and
Right.
Off we go. And so Know My Menu though it's because I guess the thing is that you recognize it's nice to think that the food needs are big clumps of people. I can't have nuts. I can't have gluten. But God, there's so many different
scattered out,
so many small things, and with Susan's help, so much help. Just feed her the menu, the recipes, and somebody could just put in what they want, and boom, they got it.
Right. Yeah, and I think in a market like Midway, Park City, it's perfect for a tool like Know My Menu because there's so many conscious eaters.
Yeah.
In that demographic, people who can afford to put the best food into their body,
Yep.
and they want to know exactly what they're putting. They're very athletic. They're like, wellness is important to them. So the cool thing with Know My Menu is it's not just about like I'm trying to avoid gluten, I'm trying to avoid nuts, and you can do that with this tool because you can literally you scan a QR code, it brings you to a menu where you see the entire menu. You can click on each menu item. And you can see the ingredients that are in each one of those items. You're allergic to dairy, then you can select dairy, and it will remove every option that is on that menu that includes dairy, or will at least like give you a warning like there's dairy in this.
Yeah.
So like you can really customize like your food adventure, and filter through what like now you do. If you don't want to see things that might be good, but you can't have it, you're like, I would really like that, but I can't have it. We'll take it away. It's not even an option.
Yeah. It's for me, I guess that's the tech progress that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't really, my brother and his restaurants is now got his waiters, ordering off a pad, that they walk around with.
Yeah.
And he says the awesome thing is that we don't slam the kitchen anymore, because they're ordering as they go,
right?
Instead of coming back and putting in 3 tables worth,
right?
But I have the luxury of being 66 and thinking, maybe I'll just play out my lifetime in this career with people walking to the table and actually knowing the specials, and taking your order and then going back and placing it.
Yeah.
And, maybe we're going to have to make that change, but I feel like it's, the waiter's looking at you, not looking at their pad.
Yeah, I hear that. Anything we have not discussed today that you want to get out before we start to wrap it up?
I just want to say that I think one of the things I thought about when we were, reading up about this was, would I want my son to do this job or take over this restaurant? So I have a 32-year-old son and a 15-year-old. 32, he's on to other things. Fine, whatever. Unless maybe when he's 38 or 40, he decides to do it. But I think about the 15-year-old, and I think about you having grown up, and your parents are like, "Didn't we teach you? You want to be out of this business, And I love this so much. I love cooking. I love all the people that are here, the staff. I love the customers. I love being able to take care of them, the hospitality side. And I realize that what I don't really understand is, how do you go from being 21 and I like to cook, but you don't get to be a chef at 21. And how long do you have to go before you can start to move into that world? But I realize the litmus test for me is, you gotta love handling food. And what I see too often with chefs, you go to hire a sous chef or chef, and they're dying to get in that office right there, and get home at 5:00, and you're like, dude, get out of my restaurant.
Right.
That if you don't love to cook and to handle food, that you can't be here. And so for me, if somebody is 22 years old and they want to be a chef, it's like, don't even think about that right now. Just think about how fun it is to handle food. Take a carrot, peel it, cut it just the way you want, add it to this other thing. It doesn't have to be, all the sexiest ingredients. It's just that I love handling food.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. So
I love that. I love it. So what is one thing about your business, a value, a process, a system that's truly uncommon and makes you unstoppable? Is it that, handling the food?
I think it's, I have 3 sous chefs. So I have wow, I'm the chef and I have 3 sous chefs in this not that big a restaurant or whatever.
Yeah.
And those guys cook every day, all day. So I guess, we may not be doing everything right financially, but we're also not spending a lot of time on our asses looking at a computer screen.
Right.
We are making really good food. We're paying attention to everybody who's making it. We're, I think that and staying the course with food that is on track with what people want.
I love it. Awesome.
Is that enough?
That's perfect. The mission is to change the world through inspiring, empowering, and transforming the industry. So I think if we're going to do that, we're going to change one owner at a time. We're going to transform one owner at a time by giving them a perspective of what the job done right looks like. So how have you personally transformed? How are you a better person today than the man you were back in 2020, or sorry, not 2020, 2000 when you got started?
Yeah. I think I understand the role the food plays. And I think that then I was so busy with the whole thing. And now I really feel like, I don't think that, I think I understand, okay, we have recipes. I have to have good people I have to have great prep cooks who are going to make that food the right way so that the guys on the line can execute well. And I guess that, I think, you go to so many restaurants and you had a great experience and then you didn't. How did that happen? Who stopped paying attention? And I just think that if all of my sous chefs are working in the kitchen and I'm working in the kitchen, it's not that it's just all about the food, but if we know that what we're making is right again and again and again, people are going to keep coming.
Yeah.
You know?
So today you're not as distracted by all the ancillary things, and you keep your core focus, the food.
And I think, you know, I love this, and I speak a lot of Spanish, but I had kind of a brain fart on this. You know, I walk around to the table to try to get out, you know. Everything going okay? Oh, it's great. As always. Like always. That phrase out of people's mouth. And I go back in the kitchen, and I was like, I got a lot of Latinos back there, and I was like, how do you say like always? Como siempre. Como siempre. That's how we succeed, is that like always. It's really good like always, like always, like always. And so, and I can go back and say to them, everybody out there, como siempre, and you know, and keep in mind that we got to do it like always.
Yeah, this is the last question. We made it to the end.
I talk a lot.
No, this is what you're here to do.
You're on my real subjects right now, man.
Yeah, no, I've loved today's conversation. Thank you so much. This is the last question before we have you call somebody out. If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work, and your restaurants would be lost with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom you could leave behind for the good of humanity and your legacy. Who would those 3 pieces, or what would those 3 pieces of wisdom be?
It's about the people.
1.
It was so simple in Seattle on the wall of one of the Central District restaurants, you know, Martin Luther King. Love can drive out hate. Hate cannot drive out hate. You know?
Yeah.
And so
That's beautiful.
And it's just so easy to get mad and want to get even, or, you know, and there's so much, God, rancor in our world right now. And I just try not to go there.
Yeah.
You know, I try to, you know, just try to, and it's kind of campy, but bring the love.
Yeah.
You know?
I can get behind that. What's the 3rd thing?
You're either living or you're dying, and I'm living. And I hope that's what everybody's doing.
I love it. This has been a lot of fun. So it's about the people. Love can drive out hate. Hate can't drive out hate. And living or dying. And you're living. Well done, my friend. This has been a lot of fun. So I really want this last question. I say that last question I just asked is the last question, but technically this is the last question.
I get you.
Who do you respect and admire in the industry? Who is doing it right? Who is somebody that if you could get into their head for 2 hours and learn all about their perspectives and their values and their business savviness, you'd want to hear what that person has to say?
I would say I've changed my mind about who it is. It's that farmer 4 blocks away.
Okay.
His name is Chris Piper, and he is so true to his food. And, you know, I get farmers who bring me lettuce that's not been washed, and you got to wash it. Chris takes care of his stuff, so when I get it, it's beautiful. And I think he's figuring out how to make a business of it.
Awesome.
It's a cool dude.
Chris
Piper,
Chris Piper.
P-Y-P-E-R.
Chris Piper, look out. I'm coming after you. It might be in the next 2 hours because I don't know how much longer I'll be in Midway, but I'd love to get you on the show. And how can we connect with you if we really enjoyed today's conversation? If we're maybe looking for a job and we're moving to, you know, Utah. Or maybe we just have questions about today's conversation. That's the best way to connect.
So my email's easy, john@midwaymercantile.com. I'm John. Midway Mercantile does not have a CH. It's not mercantile, mercantile.
Got it.
And really, I'm happy to give you my phone number.
Awesome.
Safe, 206-841-1217. I try to keep up with all those things coming in and get reply to people.
You're responsive to me, and I appreciate you for being responsive. And I can't do what I do without people like you. So thank you so much for making time, sharing your story, sharing your knowledge, your perspective, your mentorship. There is no questioning, John. You are unstoppable.
Thank you.
Cheers.
This is a cool experience.